Hey guys, hope everyone's doing well. This is Live Before Lock presented by Awesemo.com, sponsored by SuperDraft. Really exciting day of NBA, and it's good we have it back, so really thankful. Joined today by Adam Scherer, aka Shit My Money DFS. Adam, how are you doing today?
Doing good. Excited to be talking basketball for the first time in 4 months. You know, got a 5 or 6 game slate, so should be a little bit more fun than yesterday's 2-gamer.
And you lucked out that you didn't have to dive deep into that one because pretty much every good deep sleeper pretty much busted. So
yeah, I had a lot of Nicolo Melli. It didn't really go well.
Oh man, yeah. I know a lot of you guys probably split that first prize on FanDuel. That was kind of the thing to do. Unfortunately, I wasn't one of those 300 people that shared $1 million. But today, 6 games. We're going to see some real high prizes today. And also SuperDraft has a nice contest starting at 3 p.m. So I like how they staggered that start time so we can get into some lineups later on there. And we have a special promo going on. Restart gets you 50% off a full package at Awesemo.com. So make sure to get that if you want to get the projections and boom busts and all that. So Adam, I got to start off by asking you about certain teams that you may be targeting today, because not every team is created equal, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of a weird situation because you have some teams missing players. You have other teams, namely Orlando, that apparently the entire team is out of shape. So some teams obviously more appealing to target than others. I think that it's interesting too because, and you see this during the normal season also, a lot of times the teams that are appealing to target because they're missing guys also come with some uncertainty around exactly how the minutes are going to be distributed. But I think the Wizards have a lot of opportunity today because they are missing Bradley Beal, they are missing Davis Bertans. So there's a ton of usage to go around there. So I think they'll be a good team to target, also in a pretty good spot against Phoenix. Brooklyn, obviously missing Spencer Dinwiddie and Kyrie Irving, gives you a ton of usage to go around. And then you have a couple of games that should be competitive and have some playoff implications immediately with Memphis, Portland, and Houston, Dallas. So I think those 2 games are probably a little bit safer in terms of expecting big minutes from the normal players.
Nice. Yeah, we got a nice assortment of games today. No real unbalanced matchups. So even teams like Brooklyn and Washington that might be a little bit injury depleted should be able to hang in here. Let's start off with Brooklyn, because I feel like they've been the team everyone's talking about how DeAndre Jordan and Spencer Dinwiddie both tested positive for COVID, and then they're ruled out for the rest of the season. Taurean Prince also didn't make it to Orlando. Wilson Chandler, he had started some games. And Michael Beasley, he was kind of a late ad for the Nets, and then promptly it just totally didn't work out, so he's not there. They added a few new faces too, but Karis LeVert without some of these guys is probably going to see a huge role. But we also have some new faces that we might roster today from Brooklyn. So who do you start off with when you're looking at this Nets team?
Yeah, I think for me, it starts off with Caris LeVert and with Jared Allen. You have LeVert, who has played 327 minutes this season without either one of Kyrie Irving or Spencer Dinwiddie on the floor. He has a 38.8% usage rate and a 32% assist percentage over those 327 minutes. It's just it should be his team to be a playmaker, to be a scorer, to do everything for them. So LeVert really stands out. And then you have Jared Allen, who has always been a good per minute producer. It's just that the minutes are normally insecure, in part because of foul trouble, but also in part because he was essentially splitting minutes with DeAndre Jordan. No DeAndre Jordan, no other center on the entire team, really. Nick Claxton also out. You have Dante Hall, but other than that, no other center here. So Allen should play really as many minutes as he can stay on the floor for, and he's still pretty cheap. So I think those 2 really stand out. And then you kind of get you can kind of mix and match some guys. You know, Joe Harris should see a little bit more usage. Rodions Kurucs, I think, gets backup center minutes and is really cheap. So maybe he can work as a contrarian pivot to some of the more popular cheap guys. But LeVert and Allen are the 2 that really jump out to me.
Yeah, definitely. Allen, he'll have a higher minute ceiling today without Jordan for sure. LeVert, just underpriced for his new role where he's not competing with Dinwiddie for the touches. So I like those calls. We got some news this morning that Donta Hall is available to play for the Nets. He's a big, so I was kind of looking at the roster and they didn't have any like power forward or center depth, but that does make it a little bit less likely that we'll see some weird lineups today. And I've been looking at all these scrimmage game box scores to figure out what these starting lineups will be today. And what I came up with is that Timothy Luau-Cabarrot and Chris Chiozza are most likely to be in the starting lineup today. So is that who you're expecting as well, or do you think they mix it up?
Yeah, that's what I'm expecting as well. I don't think that either of them really matter all that much outside of the fact that, if you're playing 150 lineups and get to a little bit, it's fine. But whether they start or not, I have them both projected in the mid-20s in minutes. I don't think that there's a big difference in minutes projections, at least for me, between the entire group of, Chiozza, Temple, Kurucs, Luau-Cabarrot, even Tyler Johnson I have in the low 20s.
Nice. I'm kind of looking at Chiozza on DraftKings because he's 3,900. And I think that if he's playing well, he should see the minutes. There is some decent point guard depth, though, so I don't feel terribly confident that could be a pump play. Probably not the best on the slate. As far as the rest of the squad, Garrett Temple, probably coming off the bench, but he's cheap. And Joe Harris, pretty decent options, but nothing too exciting. So let's move on to the next team, the Wizards, because Bradley Beal is out. John Wall, of course, hasn't come back yet. And we had been seeing a lot of injury troubles before this quarantine. So maybe some guys are a little bit healthier than they had been. But the rotation is pretty hard to break down. Start with the starters, who you're expecting. I have Napier, Troy Brown. He didn't usually start, but he started the scrimmage games. Isaac Bonga and Thomas Bryant. And let's see, did I name four guys?
Yeah, Rui's the fifth.
Oh, Rui Hachimura, of course. So as far as DFS plays, Troy Brown seems particularly underpriced, as well as Thomas Bryant. But we know these guys aren't really like reliable fantasy players. So what do you make of this Wizards team?
I'm going to be going to both of them a lot and just holding my breath. At least the game starts at 4, so I'll get an hour and a half of thinking my lineups are good before Troy Brown and Thomas Bryant inevitably tank them. But I expect Troy Brown to be one of the biggest beneficiaries of Bradley Beal's absence. Brown really does or can do everything across the board. He rebounds, he's a capable playmaker, and he's a capable scorer. And so you take Beal's 30+% usage rate out. You also take Davis Bertans' shooting out. And I think that Troy Brown comes in with around the 20% usage rate, but also will contribute rebounds and assists. I think he plays big minutes. The Wizards, I think that they're obviously not competing for the playoffs, really. That went out the window once Beal and Bertans sat. But Troy Brown was their first round pick either last year or the year before. They want to get more minutes for this guy. So I expect him to play a lot of minutes. I expect him to be productive, and he's really cheap. And the same can kind of be said for Thomas Bryant, who's another younger player that they should want to develop a bit. He's a very good per minute producer, and he should play, mid to upper 20s in minutes, I think. So both of those guys are really, really cheap, and I'll be going to them a lot.
Nice. And I think they're not really the sexiest names in NBA DFS, so maybe a little bit less owned than some of the other popular picks today. So let me just pull up the ownership real quick. Thomas Bryant at 19% on DraftKings. And then we have Troy Brown at 13% projected ownership. Of course, you can get this all behind the paywall. What do you make of those ownership percentages?
I think that they're both reasonable. I don't mind being above that.
Yeah, same. So I think that the Wizards could be a really nice team to target. Now, Shabazz Napier is someone that before the break, he had been averaging more than 30 minutes a game in the most recent Wizards games. But I don't feel confident projecting that today. I mean, you got Ish Smith backing him up. So what kind of value do you see in Shabazz Napier? Because maybe he can take a lot more shots without Beal in the lineup.
Yeah, he's definitely one of my guesses at who takes a lot of the usage that Beal left. We've seen Napier on different teams when he's playing without the stars that he's not afraid to go out there and shoot. I have him in at 30 minutes. I agree with you that I'm not going any higher than that. I do think that they'll play some Napier and Ish Smith alongside each other. They did it a little bit before the break, and we saw, even going back earlier this year with Minnesota, Napier was playing some alongside whoever their point guard is that I'm blanking on. So we'd seen those two guard lineups. I think they can do it here against Phoenix at least a little bit. So I have Napier at 30 minutes. I have Smith at 24. The pricing is reasonable on Napier. He's not the same kind of value as Brown or as Bryant, but there is still some upside for him if you expect him to be the highest usage player or one of the highest usage players on this team.
Nice. Yeah, I like Napier as kind of a pick that, of course, is risky, but has that upside for sure, and not a guy that everyone really relies on for fantasy normally. So I kind of like him. As far as the rest of the team, Mo Wagner, he is backing up Thomas Bryant most likely, but they have run some Thomas Bryant and Mo Wagner lineups, even starting lineups. So do you see Mo Wagner as having upside, or is he just too risky on today's slate?
I think he has a little bit because he's such a good per minute producer. Really, all you need is Thomas Bryant to get in foul trouble against DeAndre Ayton, and Mo Wagner's in line to have a big game. They also, at times prior to the break, had some success using Wagner against more offensively minded centers like Ayton, because Thomas Bryant's terrible defensively. Mo Wagner has a reputation of being really good at picking up charges and doing a little bit more to slow down high usage bigs. So there is at least a path to him getting the minutes, and that's all you really need with him. So at basically the same price point, I definitely prefer Bryant because I think that the minutes are his unless he screws up. But with Wagner coming off the bench, you don't need too much to break your way for him to be in a good spot.
Yeah, that's a good call because Thomas Bryant definitely could get in foul trouble. Wagner, of course, he fouls at an alarming rate too, so it's not out of the realm of possibility. He gets the opportunity and doesn't convert because of that. Let's talk about some other injury situations because we have some players coming back. One of them who is more relevant today is DeAndre Ayton coming back for Phoenix. He'd been out for a while before the break. Let's just talk in general, these guys that hadn't played before the break. Do you usually think they're going to come back and play their full minutes because it's been a few months? Or with a guy like Ayton, are you a little bit more cautious when building your lineups?
In this case, I'm not too concerned about it. It's been such a long break that I don't think him, what happened prior to the break will have too much of an impact. But he played 26 minutes in Phoenix's final exhibition game. That was, the same number of minutes that Devin Booker played. So I'm pretty comfortable giving Ayton his normal, 32 to 33 minutes that he gets when healthy.
Nice. It looks like this season his average has been, there's type of my sheet here, 33. So that would be pretty solid. Not particularly cheap though. So let's look at some other guys that are coming back from injury. Rashaan Holmes for the Kings. He had missed a bunch of games before the break. I think he's going to be one of the most popular plays on FanDuel tonight because he's 3,900. Now, Holmes, is that just a lock? Because they did come out and say there's no minutes limit for Holmes tonight.
Yeah, for Holmes. He, I think, played 18 minutes in the last exhibition game, but they said there was no minutes limit. So it'll be really tough to get away from that salary.
Nice. And let me pull up my notes here. Some other guys, Jonathan Isaac. I saw people being pretty optimistic about Jonathan Isaac, but he played 7 minutes in one exhibition game, so I'm just not on him.
Yeah, they also said that he could play more minutes today, but he wouldn't play significant minutes.
Okay, so if you're considering Isaac, I definitely recommend crossing him off. One of the more interesting guys is Nurkic. He hasn't played all season, and to boot, Portland has a pretty much equivalent player in Hassan Whiteside. So what do you think Portland's going to do with Nurkic back?
It sounds like they're planning to start them alongside each other, which is really weird. But they are playing a team in Memphis where that'll work because you're going up against Valanciunas and Jaren Jackson, a bigger front court. They started alongside each other 2 exhibition games ago. I have them both in for, I think, 27 minutes. I don't really know what to expect. Obviously, we haven't seen them play alongside each other. You haven't seen Nurkic play alongside a true center before. So I don't really know what to expect. I do think that Nurkic's salary at $5,800 on DraftKings is cheap enough that I'm certainly willing to take my chances and see what happens.
Nice. Yeah, so Nurkic could be an interesting GPP play there. Now, the idea of them starting together is a little bit contentious, I guess, because they've run both starting lineups in the scrimmage games, one with Nurkic Whiteside. The other guy has been Zach Collins, that's been starting at power forward. And the other starters, I assume, will be Carmelo, McCollum, and Lillard. So Zach Collins we have as one of the most popular plays of today's slate. So this game starts at 3, so you should be able to late swap. But how are you going to build your lineups not knowing if Collins is starting or, he's so popular too?
Yeah, I'm expecting Nurkic to start, so I'm building that way. I still have Collins as a good value, even if I expect him to come off the bench. So I'll still be getting there. But the other reason that I'm doing that is because it'll be a lot easier if Collins does start. It'll be a lot easier to swap down from Nurkic and then swap up to some other guys than it'll be if I project Collins for 30 minutes and then have to cut him down to 24 and try and get to Nurkic. It's going to be a lot harder to do.
That's a good point. Yeah, just having a little bit more salary flexibility. But Zach Collins, he has first of all, he didn't play after the first 3 games of the season due to injury, but it does look like he's fully back. And in the scrimmage games, he was starting 2 out of 3. So I definitely understand the reason why he's popular, but definitely not a guy that you have to have because he's just not that great at a permanent performer. On to the next situations here. We got Jaren Jackson back from Memphis. A really good fantasy player, but also a guy that fouls at a ridiculous rate. So initial thoughts on JJJ?
He's way too cheap for his upside. He's a fantasy point per minute guy that if he somehow manages not to foul out, can play 30 plus minutes. That's obviously the issue. His average minutes per game is well lower than where they actually would like him to play because he does foul so much. I think in their last exhibition game, he fouled out in about 19 minutes. So you run a lot of risk rostering him, but when the salary is as cheap as it is, I don't mind taking that risk because it's very clearly factored into his salary.
Nice.
I think also if Nurkic starts, it's probably worse for Jackson, or it's definitely worse for Jackson from a foul standpoint.
That's definitely true. Yeah, good point because he's pretty active down the low, so that's something to look out for. But I agree with you that he's just too cheap. He should be mostly back. So I like Jaren Jackson. And one other team, or let's go to the Spurs here because they've been pretty rough this year, but today they have some really good plays because LaMarcus Aldridge and Trey Lyles are out. Their big depth is a lot lower, and Jakob Poeltl obviously is one of our DFS favorites. So, what are you thinking about Jakob Poeltl today?
I think he looks like a good value. You don't have Aldridge, you also don't have Trey Lyles. So Lyles being out is one of the bodies that tends to sometimes steal minutes from Poeltl. So I think Poeltl's minutes should be pretty safe here. It's also, going up against Rashaan Holmes and most likely Harry Giles. It's a decent sized Sacramento front court for Poeltl to stay out there. So I think he should be as safe as anyone in Pop's rotation ever is.
Yeah, and his backup, Drew Eubanks, is someone who hasn't played a lot this season. Poeltl is especially cheap on FanDuel, but he's at center. So he's the guy that he could really be the linchpin of your lineup because he's so cheap, but the opportunity cost is a little bit higher.
I do think there's at least a little bit of risk in this game going small. You could see Bielitsa at the 5 for Sacramento and San Antonio counter with Rudy Gay, but my assumption is that for the most part at least, that you have Holmes at the 5 for Sacramento, so Poeltl's minutes should be fine.
Nice. All right, guys. So we need all your support getting these thumbs up on YouTube. So make sure to click that. DFS is all about making these assumptions, and hopefully we're right. And maybe we can get some good juju here by thumbs up. So appreciate that. As I mentioned earlier, promo code RESTART gives you 50% off your first month of all access. And those $45 for every sport. MLB is huge right now. And this is the stuff I'm using every day to make my lineups, and I've had some success. So definitely worth using it. In addition, there's some really tough NBA DFS players in particular. So it really helps to have some reference points about who the good plays are, what the ownership is, and we have the boom bust tool to help you compare all those. So make sure to check that out. The Spurs, they've really changed up their starting lineup because Lonnie Walker has started these scrimmage games. We also had Murray and Derek White starting next to each other along with DeRozan and Pirtle. So, this is a new look for the Spurs compared to March. What do you expect to happen here?
Yeah, no Forbes, no Aldridge. So I'm expecting the Murray-White backcourt with DeRozan and Walker and Pirtle.
Nice. So Lonnie Walker is a guy that is probably most famous in DFS for winning Mach 11, like $1 million. But he's not a great permanent guy, but he's getting the start. Is that good enough?
Yeah, he's really cheap. He's in that same price range as Zach Collins, who obviously Collins I think is the better play, but they're comparable. Like Walker should play, I think, upper 20s in minutes, and that's enough to justify basically a minimum salary for me.
Nice. Yeah, he's a guy that you can sprinkle in. Like definitely if you need a cheap guy, he makes a lot of sense. So that's the play today. DeMar DeRozan, he's been a guy that you'd think with Aldridge out, he'd just be jacking up the shots, but that hasn't been the case. He really struggled with LaMarcus Aldridge out. I don't want to read into that too much because it wasn't a huge sample size, but he's probably going to go overlooked because he's not like particularly cheap on the slate. And the other factor is he's starting with Murray and White, both who are ball dominant guards. So what are you expecting from DeMar DeRozan in this new Spurs team?
I think the salary is pretty fair. I don't think he's drastically underpriced. I don't really think he's overpriced either. He should get a lot of offensive opportunities in the games without Aldridge. He has a 27% usage rate and about a 30% assist percentage. Like you said, White and Murray will have the ball in their hands plenty, but DeRozan's still going to be the number one option on this offense, and he's affordable. So he's not a priority for me as far as top-owned guys, but I do think that he's a good play.
Nice. Yeah, I think he could be a guy that goes under the radar today. And 15% ownership on DraftKings, so he's definitely not like the trendy play today. And FanDuel even better, 8,200, 12.8% ownership. I have him as a 20% chance of being a boom play, which means he scores above 10 points more than his salary should indicate. So you're definitely getting some leverage over the field with DeRozan. Now, we got some other guys that are kind of lurking around here. Murray and White. Murray was so good to start the season, but then he kind of fizzled out. This lineup doesn't seem particularly conducive to have him having his maximum performance, but pretty good fantasy player. The minutes haven't been great though. So what do you think about Murray today?
I have him in for 28 to 30 minutes. I don't love the price tag on him. I think that he does a lot defensively, which is nice. He can pick up some steals. He should be behind DeRozan in usage, probably in the low 20s. And I expect him to be second in assist percentage behind DeRozan as well. So, I think that he's an okay play, but on this team, I would put him behind DeRozan, Pirtle, and Lonnie Walker.
Nice. So secondary option tonight. And then finally, we gotta get your thoughts on White, because he's been a guy that hasn't really started most of the year, but he's started a few games. Do you see any value in Derek White?
He's at 5,700 on DraftKings, just overpriced for me because, yeah, he'll see an uptick in minutes joining the starting lineup, and he's a decent player, but he's probably going to have less usage than every other starter out there except for maybe Jakob Poeltl. So it's an example of someone who probably will be less productive per minute than normal, even though he's getting more playing time. So I don't think it really justifies the increase in salary.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that. He just 5,700, like that's definitely ridiculous. On FanDuel a little bit better, but not a core play. Now we got a super chat from Kevin, so thanks Kevin for that. He wants to know what randomness settings to use with Fantasy Cruncher. So in basketball, I personally use pretty low randomness compared to other sports. So if you have just regular Fantasy Cruncher, I'd say about 10%. If you have Pro, maybe 25 to 30. Adam, of course, you use Fantasy Cruncher as well. What settings do you typically use?
Yeah, about the same for you. I usually use about a half standard deviation for everyone, which comes out to about what you just said.
Nice. So you can get the standard deviations I project for players and the boom bust too. So if you want to get more advanced, Kevin, you can use those to calculate a randomness for each player. We also had a question about Jabari Parker. Casey said, please talk about Jabari Parker. And Willie said, don't play Jabari Parker. Is he even in play today? Because I don't really get it, but
I have him at 12 minutes. I'm not confident he plays any. Yeah, I mean, he's a good producer when he plays, but it's really tough to see the minutes for him because you have Holmes healthy in the front court. You have Giles, you have Bielitsa. They've said they might start Harrison Barnes at the 4 and play small. You have Bazemore that's going to get minutes. It's just a pretty loaded front court, and I think it'll be tough for Parker to play enough minutes to matter.
Yeah, I'm not particularly excited about Parker either. I have him for 6 minutes, so I'm not really sure he plays. Let's go to the Kings because they're kind of an up-and-coming team. They benched Buddy Hield before the break. He got replaced by Bogdanovic. And as a result, I'm kind of not really seeing a ton of value in this team. Hield's kind of high usage off the bench, but he doesn't get the minutes. Fox has performed a little bit better with the new starting lineup because he doesn't compete with Hield as much, but he's not great value today. So do you see anything on the Kings team?
Secondary plays, but I think probably good tournament options because they don't grade out as the top plays. But you mentioned the increase in usage for both Fox and Hield. Hield's pretty cheap at only 5,200 on DraftKings. It's a Spurs team that struggled defensively this year, and if Hield gets hot off the bench, then he'll very easily pay off that price tag. So it's just always tough to get, or it's always hard to find someone that has a usage rate up around 28% at this salary, which is the case for Hield. So it gives you tournament upside, and then Fox benefits from that change as well. His usage rate since the starting lineup change is up around 31%. Even if you knock it back a little bit to account for the sample size, I still expect around the 30% usage rate for him. So they're both high upside plays, but if you're looking just at projections, there's going to be better point per dollar plays around both of them.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree with your take that they make good GPP plays. They're not core pieces of your lineup, but you need a couple of guys that are a little bit expensive that don't really pop in optimizers because so many people just optimize. If you have an overly optimized lineup, you're going to be duplicating too much with other people. We saw that last night on FanDuel. Of course, the 2-game slate makes that like tenfold, but even if you don't overlap all 9 or 8 players, you're still leaving yourself a narrow path to victory. So having players like Hield, like Fox, that aren't going to be super popular is a good way to increase your chance of winning. All right, we just got the starting lineup for the Nets. We got Chiozza, LeVert, Harris, Thomas, Allen. So that means Lance Thomas. Is that right?
Always nice when you get a starter that you had projected 0 minutes for.
Yeah, so let's see. That means that TLC is not starting,
right?
So does that mean you're gonna leave TLC off your lineups?
Yeah, I wasn't going to get to him much anyway, but it certainly puts his minutes more in question. My guess is still that Lance Thomas plays like not enough minutes to matter, but it certainly doesn't help TLC.
Yeah, I'm gonna update the projections here. So the main difference here is that TLC is probably not a safe play like he might have been. Thomas, you're not playing Thomas, right?
Right.
Okay. Good, because that definitely seems pretty risky given he wasn't even on a team most of the year. All right. Let's go to some other teams here. So we kind of glossed over Memphis. They're an up-and-coming team. We got Jonas Valanciunas. He is a high upside play, but with the return of Brandon Clark and Jaren Jackson, that's kind of taking every big out of the equation for me except Triple J. So what's your read on these bigs in Memphis?
I think I'm a little higher on them than you because we are expecting a big Portland front court, whether it's Collins or Nurkic starting alongside Whiteside. Normally, we were seeing Valanciunas and Clark split set or share center minutes. Valanciunas typically gets up around 30, and then Clark was playing 18 to 20. I think that against this Portland front court, you could see them play alongside each other a little bit. So I have Clark at 22 minutes. I have Valanciunas at 30. Neither one's going to be a great play at their salaries, but they do both produce at such a high rate when they're on the floor. I don't want them together, but certainly guys you can use in large field tournaments. Jackson, we talked about being the guy that stands out, but also John Morant at only $7,000. I think should play a lot of minutes here. This is a game where these teams are battling for the final playoff seed in the West. So I expect them both to really be going at it. And we did one takeaway, I think, from yesterday's games. I didn't really know how to project minutes for the star players. They played pretty close to normal minutes. So I'm okay giving, like 34 minutes to John Morant here.
Nice. He has only averaged 30 on the season, so I'm a little bit less optimistic about that. But Tyus Jones is out, so that does provide some more avenues for him to get there. Grayson Allen is back for the team on Memphis, so he's someone to factor in, but not a DFS play. And then Dylan Brooks, he's kind of a boomer bust play. Any love for Dylan Brooks today?
Not a ton. He's someone that'll go out there and chuck up a ton of shots, but he should still have less usage than Morant, you would hope. So nothing like if I'm looking for that type of player, I prefer Buddy Hield.
Nice. Yeah, he definitely doesn't seem exciting today. So, all right, guys. We have a special promo going on with SuperDraft, where if you use the code Awesemo10, you get $10 off your first deposit of $10 or more. $20 off or $20 free with $100 deposit or more. And I don't mind a couple extra Hamiltons in my pocket. So definitely take advantage of that. They have a 3 p.m. lock time today. So if you're not a SuperDraft member after lock, make sure to sign up with Awesemo10 and enter some of those contests today, because the more sites you play on, the more you can kind of spread around your risk. And they have a special multiplier system instead of salary cap. So you really get different players in your lineups. We'll give some SuperDraft plays after 1:30 here, or 2:30 Eastern. So stay tuned after the show for that. Let's talk about Houston, because they've had a little bit of roster shakeup here. We have Eric Gordon out. And we got the news that Daniel House is going to be starting for Houston instead of Eric Gordon. And then Thabo Sefolosha played occasionally, but he's not in Orlando. But Westbrook, Harden, these are obviously top studs in the league. So are they going to be salary spend ups for you?
I'm a little nervous because obviously they're both really high upside plays, but I have I like Luka more than Harden. I like Giannis more than Harden. So it's going to be tough for me to get there. One big piece of news is that D'Antoni said that they expect Harden to play off the ball a bit more. That's not by itself. It's not that concerning because, obviously he's capable of scoring regardless, but if you remember before the break, post-trade deadline, you were seeing Russell Westbrook actually have a higher usage rate than James Harden, I think in part because of how much spacing there is now with this Rockets team, and it's a lot easier for Westbrook to get to the rim. Now they're talking about Harden playing off the ball more. It doesn't make me feel better about him suddenly taking back all that usage that Westbrook was stealing. So, I still think he's obviously one of the highest upside plays on the slate. It's just that I think maybe not quite as high as the other two that I mentioned.
Yeah, I agree that it's just not anything to get super excited about because we know exactly what to expect and they're priced accordingly. Harden especially is very expensive in the industry today. So guys that you can spend up on, but I agree with you that I prefer Luka. So let's talk about the Mavs then, because they had, let's see, Dwight Powell was injured before the break. Now they lost Willie Cauley-Stein. MKG and Courtney Lee weren't really factors, but they're not playing. But Luka has just been so exceptional this season that even without much of a roster change, he seems like a great play, and he's not the most expensive guy in the slate. So is Luka going to be the guy that you're just going to have in a lot of lineups tonight?
Yeah, I love Luka here. Houston plays at a really fast pace. They look to get out and run, so there's extra possessions for Luka. He rebounds, he gets assists. He leads the team in rebounding and in usage and assist percentage. He also has a 14.5% rebounding percentage in games he's played with Porzingis this year. So all of that, I think, just sets up great for Luka.
For sure, yeah. I mean, he does stuff the stat sheet in a way like no other player really does right now. So, and as you mentioned, Houston, positive pace matchup, so that's definitely boding well for him. Porzingis with Luka hasn't really had the same numbers as without, so he's a fade for me. Do you have any love for Porzingis?
I do have some because I think the rebounding numbers should be really good here. He's going up against a 6'7" Robert Covington at center. So you're talking about having like a half a foot height advantage for Porzingis. The rebounding numbers I think should be really good. He's obviously a good scorer. In the games with Luka, he has about a 26% usage rate, which is obviously a lot lower than when Luka's out. But I still think it's a good matchup. So tough to really prioritize him among some of the other center options, but I think he should be able to grab pretty much any rebound he wants.
Yeah, that's a good point. That Houston center situation is not very scary for rebounds. Although PJ Tucker is kind of like a favorite player of our site to chatter about. So make sure to follow Awesemo_com on Twitter. I would set the odds at -200. There will be some tweets about PJ Tucker playing center today. So do you see anything else on the Mavs worth mentioning? I mean, Tim Hardaway had been starting. Boban should see some action, but these guys aren't really plays for me. But one thing I noticed just kind of looking at some other sites' projections were that they were projecting a lot of minutes for Maxi Kleber, who before the break was playing a lot. I think this is a really tough matchup for that. Him and Porzingis were playing a lot of minutes alongside each other against some bigger teams, but I have trouble thinking that they're going to run a lot of Porzingis and Maxi against PJ Tucker and Robert Covington. I think that it's more likely that you see a little bit of additional run for guys like JJ Barea, for Justin Jackson. So I'm not anywhere close to where I saw Kleber on some other sites. That's a good call because Kleber isn't really a guy they need to force into a lineup. He's the guy that kind of is convenient to put in there versus bigger teams. So I could definitely see it playing out that way. Let's go to Milwaukee because they have some news here with Connaughton out. More importantly, Bledsoe's out this game at least. So Bledsoe being out means Dante DiVincenzo probably draws a start. That's what we saw earlier in the season. And then Giannis, without Bledsoe dishing out the ball as much, should potentially see more assists. So is Giannis going to be a core play for you today?
Yeah, I think that, the issue you always run into with Giannis is the minutes. He just doesn't play as many minutes as guys like James Harden. I have him in for 30 minutes here, but he's the best per minute producer in the league. And Bledsoe being out does make a big difference. In games that Middleton was in, but Bledsoe was out earlier this year, 44% assist percentage for Giannis. He just takes on an even bigger role as a passer, and then he's always going to lead the team in usage and he rebounds. So I have him right there with Luka as far as top plays on the slate.
Nice, man. I like it. So Giannis, he's already so good, and then having no Bledsoe just gives him an extra bump. So I like that. Now, I heard people talking about George Hill. I assume DiVincenzo draws the start here. Do you agree with that? And do you think DiVincenzo is a good punt?
Yeah, I have DiVincenzo at 26 minutes. I have Hill at 22. So, I agree with you. Neither one really jumped out to me. DiVincenzo is still obviously going to lose usage to Giannis and to Middleton. So, the extra minutes aren't the most productive minutes.
Okay. Yeah, so DiVincenzo, not quite as good a player in the starting lineup. I agree with that. Let's talk a little bit about building lineups today, because I just completed some for DraftKings. I noticed I had a bunch of Wagner and Thomas Bryant in the same lineup. Obviously, those players aren't really ones you want to have together because they're not going to share the court, except in unlikely circumstances. So on Fantasy Cruncher, you can set a group if you're building lineups to avoid taking duos like that. So are there any groups that you would set tonight?
Yeah, actually just finished setting them. I think I ended up with like 17, but
damn,
they were mostly just not getting terrible punt plays from the same team together and not doing the big thing is the centers, Bryant and Wagner. I don't want Vooch and Mo Bamba together. I don't want, I wouldn't want Porzingis and Kleber, who we just talked about, together. So it's pretty much that kind of stuff. Daniel Tice and Enes Kanter, I don't want together.
Yeah, so make sure that you don't have guys that take away from each other. That is one way to kill your GPP upside. So. I
think one group that I thought was good was, we talked about Nurkic and Collins, who's going to start. I didn't do max 1 of Nurkic and Collins. Instead, I did max 2 of Nurkic, Whiteside, and Collins, because we really don't know how that rotation is going to work out. But 2 of them are likely to be in the closing lineup.
Nice. Yeah, so maybe 2 out of 3 bigs in Portland. Let's talk about Orlando, because we haven't gotten to them yet. Markelle Fultz and Isaac are on minutes limits, so they're not really plays. But what about the rest of the team?
I think Augustine's a decent value with Fultz not being in shape to play big minutes. He should get a lot of run. But and it's a good spot for Vooch against Jared Allen and a just non-existent Brooklyn front court. One big concern, though, is that Steve Clifford said he anticipates using a 10 to 11 man rotation. 10 to 11 man rotation because the team just isn't in shape to use less.
Ooh, well, that's definitely not something that you'd like to hear. So make sure that probably just stick to the starters here. I'd say no Terrence Ross, no Fultz, but does that mean you're going to cross off Vooch, Gordon, and Fournier as well then?
No, I mean, I still projected them around 30 minutes, and they're still cheap enough where, especially Vooch and Fournier, that I'll get to them in some tournament lineups, because we hear coaches all the time say things that don't exactly come true. So I'm not crossing them off. I mean, they still got good enough run in the preseason. I think Vooch in their last game played 25 or 26 minutes. I think that there's a good chance the bigger issue is that Fultz is not in shape, Isaac's not in shape, and so they have to run a deeper rotation to kind of cover for those guys. So I don't think it necessarily precludes at least one of like Vooch or Fournier playing normal minutes.
Nice. So we're all kind of guessing at this point what the minutes are going to look like when these teams haven't played in a while. So we're all on the same kind of using the same information right now, but after today's slate, you should have a lot more information about what these rotations will look like. one favorite site of ours is popcornmachine.net to be able to track the rotations. So let's go back to the overall slate kind of view here. Who do you think the top play on tonight's slate is?
Luka, I think, at the top. Troy Brown's one of my favorite values. I'm actually making my lineups now, so I'll have a better idea in a few minutes of what I'm actually getting to. But they both really stood out to me.
Yeah, same. I think the Wizards are definitely a team that I'm looking to have as kind of a contrarian option, because it seems like just looking around the industry, people are really high on certain players like Zach Collins, where guys like Thomas Bryant and Troy Brown may be less trendy picks. So I think there's a lot of edge to kind of go into that team. And then the Spurs as well. Now, have you built your FanDuel lineups yet? Because it seems like whether you choose Jakob Poeltl or not is like a immediate decision that seems pivotal.
I have not built my FanDuel lineups.
Okay, so let me I put some in here. So let me see. I had like 500 entries. I have Poeltl in like 500. So that's one really bold stand I'm taking today. So if you're entering some last minute FanDuel lineups, maybe you just start there. I'll have Troy Brown for me. Rashaan Holmes is a lock. I have him even more than Poeltl. Of course, power forward, it doesn't have that same opportunity cost. So those are some guys that I'm looking at as far as value plays. I'm just trying to finish off some lineups here, kind of hitting the crunch time. Are there any players on tonight's slate or today's slate that you think may be going over-owned?
Over-owned?
Yeah.
Potentially Zach Collins, just not because he's a bad value, but you see all the time that the best value tends to get probably more ownership than he should when you factor in range of outcomes. There's a lot of 3K guys that have high upsides and really just need one thing to break their way for them to have really good games. You have Mo Bamba, you have Enes Kanter, you have obviously lower point per minute guys like Bonga and like Lonnie Walker, but there's so many guys around 3K that I'm not. I guess I don't want to say that a $3,000 flat Collins is too owned, but that you could at least make the argument for them being viable pivots at lower ownership.
Nice. Yeah, I think Zach Collins is the guy that stands out as far as ownership to me as well, being a little bit high. But I don't feel really strongly about fading him either because he's only 3K.
Right.
So that's the tough one. Lonnie Walker is a guy that he's 20% projected, and I just don't think he's a good enough point per minute performer or getting enough minutes potentially to justify 20%. How are you feeling about Walker?
Yeah, I think that's a good call. I mentioned him as a pivot to Collins, but I didn't realize how close he was actually in ownership to Collins. So that's another one where, I think you can pivot to some other 3K guys that are better point per minute players.
Nice. Yeah, so those are a couple of guys. You can get all these on the boom bust tool kind of to sort through them. We got the Wizards starting lineup. We got Napier, Brown, Bonga, Hachimura, Bryant. Shouldn't be any surprise to you if you're watching. That doesn't really change anything for you, does it?
No.
Yeah, so definitely still like those Wizards guys. Now, let's talk about some sleeper plays. We talked about the big studs. Let's gloss over that again because I think we reached the conclusion that Luka and Giannis were the best plays as far as the upper spend range. Do you agree with that, or are there other guys that you think are up to that standard?
Yeah, I agree with that. They're my top two.
Okay. So as far as sleepers, maybe guys that aren't being really noticed by the industry, who might be a guy that's coming in at a low ownership that you're looking to?
If Troy Brown's ownership still hasn't increased, he's probably who I'm going to end up the most overweight on.
Nice. Yeah, I got a ton of Troy Brown as well. It just seems like if the Wizards starting lineup does well, like maybe they even leave out that combo of players. So maybe you get a little bit of correlation between like a Thomas Bryant and Troy Brown. And Troy Brown, he hadn't really got many opportunities to start this year. So this may be a higher upside situation for him than we've seen, especially with Bradley Beal out. Now, as far as injuries, I saw some people talking about Aaron Baines and Saric. That doesn't really seem pivotal to the slate, but do you have any read about tonight's injury situation?
Saric was limited in practice. Baines is going to be limited, just coming back from COVID. Saric was limited in practice, so he's not on the injury report, but we'll have to wait and see. If he is out, then I think you get more minutes for Cam Johnson, which would be the primary beneficiary. Beyond that, you're kind of just rolling the dice because Phoenix is really thin on the wings, but I think that what'll happen if Saric is out is you'll see Bridges and Booker play the three, and then you'll just get minutes kind of spread around to guys like Kaminsky, Diallo, Ty Jerome, Javon Carter. Like they have a bunch of bodies that can soak up those minutes at other positions with Booker and Bridges taking the minutes at the three.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think that with Baines, Kaminsky is pretty much a guy that can sub in and take those minutes one for one. Cam Johnson isn't really a good enough fantasy performer to plan my whole day around, I would say. Is that your take too?
Yep. He's also not the minimum. So.
Oh, he's not? Okay. So
I think 4,300 on DraftKings.
Yeah. So the site set these salaries a while ago, probably not really knowing who's going to play. So that might be one situation where they got it a little bit wrong. All right. So have you finished your lineups yet? I know a lot of people have been chattering about how maybe you can't get in your upload until too late, like on some sites. So I definitely recommend getting them in a few minutes early. How have you been faring here?
Still working on it. I caught a couple mistakes that a couple typos I had that I needed to fix. So still running them. It's looking like I'm going to get a lot of Enes Kanter in tournaments, which scares me a lot.
Well, yeah. I feel bad that we didn't talk about Boston. That was my bad. So the reason I'm not on Kanter is because we have Tice starting, but then they also like running Robert Williams, and I can't remember if he's injured before the break, but so it's like a 3-man center rotation potentially. Or do you have a read that Kanter is going to play more than?
I have Kanter at 16 minutes behind Tice. I do think you could see Semi out there a little bit as well. They tend to like to use him against Giannis, but it's basically that Kanter's the min 3K. I think that, and he's such a good per minute player that there's definitely a path to him at low ownership. I'm not sure that it's the kind of guy I want my day revolving around, but I do think it's a good tournament play.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, where he's definitely a guy that he's always come off the bench, basically, in DFS. And once in a while, he just has that 40-point performance that you never saw coming. Let's talk a little bit about the rest of the team. So Kemba Walker is a fade. He is limited to 20 minutes today, according to the reports. So if you have Kemba in your lineup, I definitely recommend swapping. Now, there is late swap on every site now, so you don't have to do it immediately necessarily. Our first game is that Orlando Brooklyn one, so you got some time. Do you see any value on Boston today, other than Kanter?
Other than Kanter, not really. I think they're actually one of the least appealing teams because, Kemba's limited, but that's still 15 to 20 minutes where he's going to be out there taking shots. Tatum's priced up a ton. They're all pretty expensive. They're kind of priced like Kemba wasn't going to play. So outside of taking shots on Kanter in tournaments, I don't have much from Boston.
Yeah, let me see if I got any. I just finished my DraftKings lineup, so I got a good idea where I'm falling today. Tice looks like a play. Jaylen Brown on FanDuel. He looks really cheap at 5,800, so that's going to be a nice play. All right, I finished my lineups. I noticed I have TLC in some of these lineups, so I got to edit this because I don't think he's a good play. I didn't account for that news. So that's kind of the struggle here. Pirtle, 54%. Thomas Bryant, 63%. Can you talk me off the ledge here on some of these guys?
On Bryant and Pirtle?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. So I got that.
23% Ennis Cancer on DraftKings. So.
What are you at?
23.
Oh, wow. That's
so it's like 2x the field.
Dude, if you... I could see you having a big night, man, if he has that kind of performance, because I don't think too many people are on him. So
yeah.
Let me see who my other stands are.
I have 78% Brown on DraftKings.
Jaylen Brown or
no, sorry, Troy.
Oh, Troy Brown. Yeah, I got a bunch of him. So that's the stand I'm taking too. Sorry, guys. I'm kind of going through my lineups here. This is a new thing we're trying where we're really giving you the inside look of the lineups being finished.
I'm fully expecting to find someone right after the show that I did not realize I had like 80% of.
Yeah, for sure. I just got a message in Slack about, did you see this? So it sounds like I might have missed something, and I'm nervous about what that says, but I don't have time to check. So that's definitely the struggle of doing for everyone, like there's just not that much time to react to the news. So fortunately today was a little bit of a slow day, and I'm expecting that going forward because of the staggered lock times. But do you have any tips for people about how to complete their lineups if there is some late breaking news?
I think a big thing that helps is just keeping in mind what news you're expecting throughout the day and already having a game plan for what you need to switch, so that you don't have to like redo everything. You kind of just have an idea of where you're going.
That's some great advice. Yeah, I think that that makes a lot of sense. One of the things I'll do is I'll have 2 sets of lineups if there is some late news, so that when the news comes out, I'm ready to just punch them in immediately. So that's definitely something, if you have time to really prepare for a slate, I recommend. Another thing you can do is just work around the late swap, where like if there's a player who's questionable, like make half your lineups as if they're going to play, half if they're not. And that gives you a little bit more exposure to guys, where if you just assume one of the 2 possibilities, then you might miss out on some really good plays. So just a little tip, a couple tips there. I really am cutting it down to the wire here. There's 2 minutes to lock right now. So if you haven't already put in your lineups, then you might be in trouble. You got them in?
Yeah, I just got them in.
Okay. So
now I get to see what the hell I have.
how are you shaking out here?
Scared. Let's see. Um, 80% Giannis, 79% Luka, 20% Ayton, 40% LeVert, 30% Jared Allen, 22% Nurkic. Let's see, what did I do with Zach Collins? 15% Zach Collins.
So that's a pretty big stand, I'd say.
Yeah, not totally intended, but
I ended up getting 40%, so I'm right around the field, I think. But
30% Kyle Anderson, who I forgot to talk about, but he should get some backup playmaking duty for Memphis.
Well, actually, I see I have some Kyle Anderson too, but he's probably starting, right?
Yeah. But I'm thinking they might run him some with the second unit.
Nice. I didn't get a chance to late swap on FanDuel, so I'm really nervous about how much TLC I have, because I had to really cut it down to the wire to get him out on DraftKings. So hopefully not too much. So it sounds like you ended up with a ton of Giannis and
Luka
in the same lineups.
Yep.
How's that possible, man? Did you set it to allow 60K salary?
Well, I have 20% Isak Bonga, so.
Wow. Actually, I kind of like it, man. I think that he's a guy that no one's going to have, and the minutes are sky's the limit pretty much. Like the team doesn't love playing him, but he does have games where he plays 30 minutes occasionally, and we have this big unknown, which is the new rotation. So
yep. Yeah, and I mean, the minutes should be there. Like, no Gary Payton. They need someone on that team to defend.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, they probably aren't really strong on either side of the ball. So having at least a guy that's good at one of the ones that everyone else isn't really helps. Let's talk about SuperDraft in a second here. But first of all, everyone, good luck on your contest tonight. This is a really exciting time for DFS, finally getting some semblance of normalcy. So thanks everyone for supporting the site. Let's talk about some SuperDraft plays, because now we get a pivot and start building there. They have the multiplier system, so instead of salary cap, you get that multiplier. So the general thoughts on what the best strategy on SuperDraft is, like, since there is no salary cap.
Yeah, I think it's to obviously take advantage of what multipliers you can and go to where obviously you're still playing an ownership game, so there's no salary cap, but you're still trying to make the best lineups you can that can actually get you first place. So still factoring in the range of outcomes for guys and getting to the guys that have a multiplier, but that also still have really legitimate raw point ceilings.
Yeah, man, it's really interesting because in NBA, the like variance on players doesn't change that much from like studs to scrubs. As far as like most of them are between like 6 and 10 fantasy points standard deviation. So if you take someone with a lower projection and has a high multiplier, you're just getting like way more variance there. So it kind of cuts both ways, where if they're popular, then that could be a bad thing. But if they're not, you really benefit from that. So it's a really interesting game at SuperDraft. Let's look at the ownership real quick on DraftKings and FanDuel, and we'll play Daddy Likes. Hopefully we won't get any sort of trademark cease and desist here, but let's go over them. I'm looking at the Millionaire Maker on DraftKings. Karis LeVert, 34%. It does Daddy Like.
Karis LeVert at 34. Yeah, that's solid.
Nice. Yeah, that seems reasonable, because he was kind of a guy that was really popping in the trendiness. As far as what everyone's talking about, they're all talking about Brooklyn. So I was expecting these guys to be real popular. Jared Allen, 31%. Is that where he should be, or is that too low, too high?
I think that's about right. I think that's where I came in.
Yeah, I agree. I think that makes sense to me. Joe Harris, 5%. Chiozza, 12%. Kind of fringe options. So Chiozza at 12% seems that's kind of where I had him, but I felt like I was kind of making some assumptions about how he played next to LeVert that I wasn't super comfortable with. So how do you feel about Chiozza?
Yeah, Chiozza, I ended up only coming in around like 2% on DraftKings.
Nice. And Fournier 5, Vooch 11. So pretty much what we were expecting there. Let's talk about some SuperDraft plays. So one guy that really jumps off the board at me is Jakob Poeltl. He has a 1.85 multiplier, and he's my second highest total fantasy point projected player today because of that. But he is a center, and you only get one. So how are you feeling about him? Like, would you take Thomas Bryant at 1.75 a center, or do you feel like Poeltl is the play?
What was Poeltl's? Yeah, Bryant was 1.75.
1.85.
I think I would go Poeltl. Like, they project similarly, and Poeltl's multiplier is higher.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's pretty close to, and Thomas Bryant's kind of a contrarian option, so maybe you could take some stabs at both. Jonas Valanciunas is coming in at 1.45 at center. He's the third highest projected center for me because he's kind of a stud player, so that 1.45 multiplier is pretty high for him. So I think you take some shots.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best ways to approach their tournaments is to get those really good per minute players that are also giving you a multiplier.
Nice. Who's really jumping out at you when you look at SuperDraft multipliers?
Let me pull it up.
Looks like Troy Brown has 1.8, Shabazz Napier 1.6. So the Wizards, pretty nice multipliers.
Yeah, Troy Brown for sure. I mean, he was someone that I obviously liked on every site today. So getting almost 2x from him is really appealing.
Nice. Who are you looking at?
All right, so whoops. Scrolling down kind of to the higher multiplier guys, see if there's anything that stands out. Yeah, so it doesn't look like there's any 2x guys that I'd really be interested in. 1.7x for Derek White is probably pretty decent. That's kind of the opposite of what we had talked about earlier on the show. Like, he's clearly not priced for starting.
For sure, yeah. I mean, he is expensive on DraftKings. On FanDuel, a little cheaper, so.
Yeah. 1.6x on Napier looks really good.
Nice.
1.55x for John Morant stands out.
Luka has 1.1x, so that's interesting. I think he's definitely my highest projected play in SuperDraft because of that.
Yeah. 10% increase over Harden, who I already had him projected higher than.
Nice. So this is a really interesting site because you can pick any combination of the players. So there really are so many possibilities. If you guys have any questions in the chat, of course, drop them in. We got a couple of minutes left. SuperDraft has this 15K tournament, $12 to enter, 1,400 entries. But I think it might have overlays, so you might get some extra money playing on there. So definitely check it out. Awesemo $10 free on your deposit of $10 more, or 20 on 100 or more. So they give you a little bit of an incentive to try it out. So make sure to support some new up and coming sites. Any other SuperDraft picks you got for me?
So that was looking through the guards. I'll go down, look at the forwards. Brandon Clark at 1.75x. That was someone that I thought has, he's like a 1.1 fantasy point per minute guy. You just need either a somewhat weird rotation or Valanciunas to get in foul trouble. Nice. We already mentioned Troy Brown at 1.8. Zach Collins at 1.9. Looks like a lot of value to be had at forward.
Yeah, one forward I like, DeMar DeRozan, 1.4x. I mean, that seems like a high multiplier for a number one scorer on his team. We did get some news here, so let's cover this news and then we'll jump off. Dario Saric is playing at the bench. Starting lineup for the Suns is Cam Johnson at the 3, Bridges at the 4, Aiden at the 5. This game, I assume it tips off at 3. So, any reaction to Cam Johnson starting?
Doesn't change much for me. I think it does help to solidify his minutes, where if Saric started, maybe you were looking at 22 to 24 minutes. Now I think there's a better chance you get 16 to 18 from Saric and maybe get up around 30 for Cam Johnson. But he's still not really cheap. I still think that, obviously he's going to lose usage to Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, who are both high usage guys. So it's a great matchup against the Wizards. It's a perfectly fine value, and starting does solidify his minutes, but it doesn't change a whole lot for me, I don't think.
Yeah, I just updated the projections, so you can refresh and see those. It's an interesting situation because I feel like most people set and forget it pre-lock, so I don't think Cam Johnson will have any ownership on DraftKings or FanDuel. FanDuel has late swap now. It didn't before, so there is the possibility of swapping out to him on both sites for someone that's super low owned. Do you think it could be a decent ownership play?
Yeah, because he is reasonably productive on a per minute basis. He's around the 0.85, 0.9 fantasy point per minute guy. So, and then you're getting this Wizards matchup. So, I do think that if you can get him at low ownership, he projects well enough to have some appeal. It's just, for me, it doesn't change his projection a ton from where I already had him.
Yeah, I agree. So, I did have one lineup with Saric, so I'm swapping off him. Let's see. The thing is, I'm trying to. Cam Johnson is small forward. Carmelo is like 5K, and Cam Johnson is 4.3. Troy Brown is 4.6. So it just seems like there aren't really any great swaps. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. All right. Guys, thanks everyone for tuning in, and I hope some guys win some big money that are watching the stream, because that always makes us happy at Awesemo.com. Adam, any final thoughts for the audience here?
Think of me when Enes Kanter doesn't play.
Oh. Yeah, send Adam some condolences later. I mean, you still got some time. The game doesn't lock till 5:30, so let us know if there are any updates about your Enes Kanter ownership.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to check out the promo Restart if you don't have a membership. 50% off the first month. And thanks for all the support. Good luck.